I'm supportive. Look, we're talking about this, I'm sure, in the Q&A. Always look at the end result with Trump, because the process can sometimes drive people mad and a little crazy, and the up and down. But like in the first term, everyone was very critical of his Middle East policy. And then we got the Abraham Accords, which was an incredible accomplishment of peace between Israel and the Emiratis and the Saudis. And so there's a process that you have to allow unfold here. As far as the tariffs brought a lot of countries to the table. You guys got actually a pretty good deal out of this. President Trump was generous enough to actually exempt Rolls-Royce and some of your major manufacturing in the latest bilateral trade deal with the United States. And I want to see our two countries grow closer together. And I think the president has the same wish. But as all the tariffs are eventually pointing at what we should. And this is the question for Europe, and this is the question for the United Kingdom. Will Europe and the United Kingdom decide to embrace the West, or will it look very, very far to the East? The rising power struggle in front of us is all the things we've talked about, but it really is the Chinese Communist Party versus Western values. The Chinese Communist Party is antithetical to even those of you that are liberal in this audience right now, is antithetical to what you believe and how you believe it. The CCP is the greatest threat to so many of these different things on the planet. And as it is this rising power, we have to reckon with this question. Are we okay as America? I don't know if that's the case here in the UK. Are we okay with not making any of our own vitamin C, none of our antibiotics, none of our own critical pharmaceuticals? We do not make our own drone materials. In fact, we are supposed to make 4 submarines a year. We only make 2 submarines a year because we have to get the parts from China. And so I think there is a vassal state problem that is presenting itself in the West, where we have grown addicted to cheap products. And the Chinese, they do manufacturing very well. And you are underestimating the Chinese if you think it's just that it's cheap labor. They're very organized. They're very industrious. They take manufacturing seriously. Being the head of a manufacturing plant in China is like being a mayor of a small town. You have power, you have prestige, you have honor. You can call the local governor at any time. They prioritized it, and they knew that this was a way that they could enter into the global market. So tariffs are in some ways a very, let's say, provocative way to bring us to a conclusion that no Western leader other than President Trump has had the moral courage to actually bring out into the open, which is like, hey guys, this century will be defined as to who actually stands up against China, and it's better that we do it in 2025 other than 2045, because we might not have the chips to bargain against them.
Thank you. On that, I think China's response to that has been very much, lax in terms of they don't care and kind of like retaliating with their own tariffs. Do you actually think they can get to a position where Trump and China can kind of like have a level playing field of an agreement?
It's a good question. I don't know. So just for you following, it was like 180% tariffs, and now it's at 30% tariffs. I can say that tariffs will remain on critical manufacturing for critical American goods. Now, if it's car seats, or if it's toys for girls, like dolls or whatever, like that's not the critical stuff. Rare earth minerals, very critical. Every single one of the smartphones in your pocket requires a combination of rare earth minerals, most of which are mined and sourced in Chinese Communist Party, China. Not because we don't have them in the West, but because all my friends that I'm sure I'll get a question from, you wonderful environmentalists, don't let us actually use our own rare earth minerals, but hey, somehow it's a different planet in China, so it's okay if they pollute, but not if we pollute. But if we import it, then, we feel good about ourselves. And so, essentially, the phones, almost everything we have in the West has some Chinese component to it. So we need to triage this. We need to ask the question, can we be self-sufficient if there is a rapid decoupling? And this is something that both our countries need to reckon with, that we need to reconcile. And right now the answer is no. And I hope that we can bring back that, not just manufacturing base, because people think, well, like, what are you just going to make, t-shirts and textiles? Well, yeah, that's part of it. But it's a lot deeper. There is a advanced manufacturing opening that's going to happen in the West right now around robotics and around drones. There will be a global supply of drones in the hundreds of millions in the coming decade. Drones are actually really, really hard to build when they're sophisticated. It's not as easy as you might think. A lot of them come from China. A lot of them, the parts do. And so all of a sudden, if we're going to be comfortable with like a country that doesn't share our values, that is at best an adversary, at worst an enemy, is going to all of a sudden control the stuff that's going to define the future, yeah, check me out on that. So I support President Trump's strategy completely in that regard.
Thank you. You've characterized the Democratic Party as antagonistic to American ideals and argue that the Republican Party falls short of opposing the agenda. As someone who identifies as a conservative, how do you define the conservative movement today, and how do you think it should evolve to engage with the next generation?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. How do I define being a conservative? Well, we as conservatives need to not just oppose, we need to stand for stuff. We want to So what we oppose is very obvious. We oppose the woke stuff. We oppose mass migration. We oppose the importation of these insidious values into our country and into the West. What do we stand for? I mean, we stand for what has worked, what is good, what is true, what is beautiful. We want to have the fertility rates reversed. We want to see church attendance go up. We want to see suicide rates take a 180-degree pivot. In our country, at least, we have the younger generation is the most suicidal, the most anxious, the most antidepressant addicted generation in history, and yet they're the most wealthy and the most prosperous. So for anyone that just thinks that material conditions alone dictate happiness or well-being, the West is a flaming indictment of that claim. Marx got some stuff right. He got some stuff really wrong. We are not just social material beings. There's something deeper here. And I believe, of course, that is the soul. And we want to try to have people look up. We want to have the people to look back, that there's something beautiful that's been passed down, that there is a moral code that we have forgotten, that there is a root to our existence that we have cut off. And we as the West are reckoning with what Nietzsche unfortunately predicted way, way back when. And when he said God was dead, he was lamenting the death of God, but he also said the West is not going to know what to do with itself. And he basically predicted the Third Reich. Like, you're going to get all these counterfeit, insane movements of nationalism and self-hatred and nihilism. And I believe the answer is not for us to create like a new moral code, which we failed to do, by the way. We have failed to do that. Why don't we just reinstitute and go back to what gave us the civilization in the first place? What is divine, what is everlasting, and as Tom Holland, I know he went to Cambridge, but you got to indulge me for a second. As Tom Holland would say in his book, Dominion, that whether you realize it or not, whether you're secular, atheist, Buddhist, Hindu, or Christian, if you live in the West, you are inheritor of a Christian tradition. The way we look at things, honor your neighbor, help the poor, charity, natural rights, these are somewhat weird ideas when you actually think about it. And instead of us trying to make a manufactured counterfeit new morality, we should go back to our Christian roots.
Thank you. A more personal question on the idea of like Christian youth and you being a very devout Christian. I remember speaking to your assistant during the vacation and he's saying you don't respond on a Sunday because you participate in
Saturday, actually. Yes.
Saturday,
yeah,
sorry.
That's right. Yeah, that's very astute.
Yeah. So kind of like more, why do you kind of like, is that something you've taken from the Jewish tradition?
Now I really like you. Now you asked the best question anyone's ever asked. I could talk about the Sabbath all day long. I don't know if anyone is interested in this, so you could roll your eyes. But I'm a Christian, so whether or not we're bound to the Jewish Sabbath is hotly debated. There's great arguments for, great arguments against. I'm actually writing a book right now on why I honor the Sabbath. It's very simple. It's called Stop in the Name of God, Why Honoring the Sabbath Will Change the World, basically. And it is an argument that in this hyper-materialistic, very fast, digitally frenzied world, that there is this gift that I believe the Lord gave the Hebrews that we have decided to just gloss over. And it's very simple. It's that for one day you will stop, that it will be holy, that it will be different. For those of you that are agnostic or not Christian, I still encourage you to do this. People that honor the Sabbath live longer. We know this with the Seventh-day Adventists. They actually are happier. They have better health outcomes. Everything about disconnecting from modernity is good for you. It is inarguable. Like this is a material fact. But why is it that we have forgotten it? Well, for me personally, I work like crazy for 6 days. On Friday night, even Sunday morning, I turn my phone off and I try to stop. I try to make it distinct. I try to make it different. It's where I do my best thinking. It's where I do my best time with my family. And again, this kind of goes back to, okay, we're trying to create all this new stuff. Like, wow, we're going to have this new technological innovation. We're going to have this vaccine and we're going to be able to solve this with quantum mechanics and quantum computing. And I'm kind of like, honestly, something was told to us on Sinai that we shouldn't forget. That like, you shouldn't work for 7 days. In the retelling of the 10 Commandments in the book of Deuteronomy, the only difference of the retelling of the 10 Commandments is when Moses says, hey, you shouldn't work 7 days because you're no longer a slave. What Moses is saying is like, only slaves work for 7 days, actually. And we in the West have kind of been slaves to our work. And I say this as a free market capitalist. That's not good. It's making us depressed. It's making us anxious. And all of you have the agency to disconnect from that, to make a choice to no longer have to be subservient to the ever more, next text, next alert, next email, next WhatsApp message. And it kind of goes back to a theme I've been saying that it has worked. It's also a phenomenal civilizational preserving tool. It's worked for the Jews. They've been kicked out of a lot of countries and a lot of people have hated the Jews, including right now. And they're thriving and they're growing and they continue. I think God has given us a preservative for a civilization, and I believe it is the Sabbath.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on a comment you just made just then about a lot of people hating the Jews right now. Would you elaborate more specifically on what you're talking about?
Yeah, and not everyone who is against Israel hates the Jews, but everyone who hates the Jews is against Israel. So it's an important connection. Look, I mean, it's coming from both sides. We all see what's happening on social media. There is this kind of temptation to blame the Jews for all of your problems. I think it's sloppy and it's wrong. No group is perfect. No group is going to act in a directionally consistent way. But look, I think that it's, at least in my country, I don't know if you guys are seeing a similar rise in the United Kingdom, but I think that there is this temptation to say that all the world's suffering is because of a small group of people, many of whom I have not met. And I reject that wholeheartedly.
But would you say the criticism is of the Jews or of the state of Israel, which I think is
no, those are two different things. So there are three issues here, and that's a very good question. And we must have the maturity to differentiate them. And in the Q&A, we could talk Israel, Gaza, whatever you want, obviously. But there is a difference between Jews, Israel, and the Israeli government. And I acknowledge those differences. So Jews is a very complicated thing because it's a people, but it's also a religion, and it's an ancestry, but it's a culture. Almost nothing like it in the world, right? Where you're kind of born into it and you can be like an atheistic Jew, but there's also like a religious text. And then there is Israel, which I believe is fundamental to Judaism. God tore Israel is the informal like trinity of Judaism. And then the Israeli government. You can support Jewish life and support Jews and support Israel, but not support this current Israeli government. It's a perfectly mature view to have. It's fine. Like I have disagreements with Netanyahu. I have agreements. I think it's okay. But I actually think we could de-escalate a lot of the finger pointing around this issue if we look at it through that lens. That anyone who says like, oh, we're going to blame the Jews, well, then that's the first, like no one here rationally, I think would, if you believe that, then we could talk about it. But then if you're like, well, I don't think Israel should exist or I don't like Israel, okay, that's another step, but that's a more reasonable argument, one I wouldn't share. But then if you're criticizing the Israeli government, so where I think a problem emerges is where my side, where I am pro-Israel, we conflate those three things and we immediately say that you're against Netanyahu, therefore you're against the Jews. I'm sorry, I think that's immature, it's sloppy, and it actually creates more resentment where it otherwise would not exist.
Thank you. On the state of Israel, in terms of its existence.
Oh, here we go, great.
I was going to leave it to the Q&A, but we started. Just a question on your belief in the state of Israel existing in its current form. Is it biblical or is it just a political belief?
Okay, so you asked, is it biblical or what?
So is your belief on the current state of Israel, where it is and how it's formed, is that belief biblical?
So I'm not a theologian, but I am definitely more, let's say, aligned with a view of Ezekiel 36, that there is a reconstitution of the state of Israel, and that was prophesied. I will bring you from across the lands and graft you together. I don't want to get into that. Again, if you guys want to talk about end times theology, I'm honestly going to be like, let's get a more important question because I don't know it that well. I'm not that interested in it. It's called eschatology. There's pre-tribulation Christians and then there's post-tribulation Christians. I'm pan-trib. It's all going to pan out in the end. Okay. Jesus will return. I'm going to be on the welcoming committee, not the planning committee. And so like, I'm not overly interested in that. Instead, I think what is lost, and I think I would like at least the anti-Israel advocates, I don't want to say anti-Israel, the critics of Israel that will come up and ask questions to acknowledge this, that it is miraculous that Israel in this current form exists. I mean, it's really unbelievable what Ben-Gurion and the Zionists were able to pull off from just the Zionist perspective. It is a miracle considering they were attacked from every direction, from its charter, completely under attack and totally brutalized. Number two, it's interesting because in the Balfour Declaration, as you will know, it actually was the smallest suggested size for Israel as of all the four plans. All that to say, what do I believe about the current composition of the state of Israel? Well, my historical analysis of whether, it should be formed or not, I actually think it should be, is not that relevant. The more important moral question is, what do you think about what is happening right now? Do you think that Israel has, I don't like I think it's a little bit of a cop-out. Like, do you think Israel has a right to exist? I think more importantly, do you believe that a country has a right to be able to defend itself into existence? That's a more important question. That if a country can prove to itself that it can exist, should it then be given recognition? So I don't know if that answers your question. It's kind of just a mind dump on the topic. I seek to actually find reconciliation on this. I think there is a downplaying what happens on October 7th to a great detriment. And I think that at times, those of us that are pro-Israel need to acknowledge war is awful. War is brutal. I'm a Christian. I hate when I see these videos of these kids being killed. I mean, it's terrible. I want to see this come to an end. I mean, like, who can possibly see that and support that? And anyone who's like, for example, like Nikki Haley signing bombs that are going to be dropped in Gaza, like, that's repulsive. I'm sorry, that's disgusting. Okay. Like, that's going to be used against people that shouldn't, like, that are just complete casualties in the war. And so, yeah, I hope that offers some clarity on that.
No, thank you. But then in terms of the question of being pro-Israel and the right of Israel to exist, when Palestine very much exists and they're fighting for their own self-determination, how do you reconcile both?
So I would push back a little bit. I think what some well-meaning Arabs are doing in the West Bank is righteous. What Hamas did on October 7th was not a fight for self-determination. I would find great exception to that claim. 1,300 people going in on a holy day on Shemat Torah, 50 days after the Six-Day War, on Shabbat, to go to kibbutzes and a music festival to kill 1,300 people and take 200 hostages, all while filming it on GoPro cameras, and then some of which, not all, calling back to their relatives on WhatsApp saying, I just killed 10 Jews. Can you believe it? I just killed 10 Jews. I'm sorry, that's not a fight for self-determination. That's something horrific and brutal and evil that every human being with a conscience would say that's wrong, and we don't support that. And so, again, as far as this idea of self-determination, there are important, and these are not trap questions. The settlements make it very difficult in the West Bank. What is a Palestinian? What are the borders? Who's in charge? These are, again, and it also kind of goes back to this because I also have to throw it back. Some people believe that Palestine, or whatever the state will be called, let's just call it PA, is from the river to the sea. Okay, so then you don't believe in a Jewish state. I come from the premise that I think a Jewish state should exist. If you want a Palestinian state, tell me where, tell me who, tell me how, and I will be open-minded to hear that contention. But if it's nothing more than the eradication of Jewry between, Jerusalem to Tel Aviv and Haifa, I'm sorry, that's where now we're blurring on the going backwards, not forwards from, okay, we're going from Israeli government to Israel to some problem with the Jews. Does that make sense? That kind of that gradation of regression, I think, is very harmful to the dialogue.